You've seen them, right? Rolling through airports, delivering your food, maybe even checking you into a hotel. Service robots. They're not coming, they're here. But how do we really feel about them? Turns out it's way more complicated than just loving them or hating them. Today, we're going to dig into the fascinating science behind our attitudes toward our new robot helpers. Right, so first things first. This isn't science fiction anymore. Robots have officially leaped off the big screen and onto the front lines of customer service. I mean, picture this. You walk into a hotel lobby, and instead of a person, you're greeted by a machine that's ready to handle your entire check-in. Or maybe you get that knock on the door, and waiting outside isn't a friendly face, but a robot carrying your late-night snack. They're becoming a really integral part of the service industry. No doubt about it. And listen, this is big, big business. In 2024 alone, the global service robot market is estimated to be worth almost $29 billion. To put that in perspective, that's more than 3 times the market for the industrial robots you see in factories. Which, of course, brings us to the most important question of all. With this huge explosion of robots into our lives, how do we as a society actually feel about them? The answer is probably not what you're thinking. For a long, long time, we've kind of assumed people are in one of 2 camps. You either love robots or you hate them. You know, the tech enthusiasts on one side and the skeptics on the other. But that simple black and white view, it's just plain wrong. We love to think of our feelings on this simple sliding scale, from positive all the way to negative. But reality is so much messier. Some of us feel positive and negative things about robots at the exact same time. That's called ambivalence. And then there are some of us who, well, we just don't really care either way. That's indifference. And you just can't capture those feelings on a simple line. And look, this isn't just some academic detail. For companies spending millions of dollars to roll out these robots, getting this wrong is a massive problem. If you don't get a handle on these different attitudes, you can't design services that people will actually want to use. You're basically flying blind. So to get a much clearer picture, researchers conducted this absolutely massive series of studies. We're talking 12 years of work looking at nearly 90,000 people across 29 different countries. And what they found gives us this incredibly powerful new way to understand our feelings about robots. Okay, so here's the key idea. Our attitude isn't just one single feeling, it's actually a combination of 2 different things. How many benefits we think robots bring, and how many risks we think they pose. All of our feelings live somewhere in this attitude space that's defined by those 2 factors. And this model gives us 4 totally distinct profiles. You've got the positive folks. They see tons of benefits and very few risks. The negative profile is the total opposite. Lots of risks, not many benefits. Then there's the indifferent group, who see low risks, but also low benefits. They just kind of shrug and say, so what? And finally, you have the ambivalent group. And these are the people who see both high benefits and high risks, all at the same time. Now get ready for this. When they actually map the population onto these profiles, the single largest group, by a landslide at 54%, wasn't positive or negative. It was ambivalent. More than half of us are basically unsure, seeing both the good and the bad in service robots. This changes the entire conversation. So why do we fall into these different groups? What in the world is driving these attitudes? Well, the research points to some really fundamental human needs. And here is a huge insight. Less positive attitudes aren't really about being afraid of technology. It turns out, being tech-savvy or not, it wasn't a big factor at all. Instead, it all comes down to a really deep-seated need for human contact and connection. People who really value that interaction with service staff are way more likely to be in the negative or ambivalent camps. Okay, so we've got these 4 profiles. They're interesting, sure, but do they actually predict how we act in the real world? The answer is a huge, resounding yes. In one study, researchers had people interact with a virtual service robot. And just as you'd expect, the positive profile felt the least discomfort, the least anxiety. But look at the ambivalent and negative profiles. Their high perception of risk translated directly into feeling more anxious and uncomfortable during the actual interaction. And this is where it gets super practical. By sifting through thousands of online reviews of robot hotels, the researchers came up with clear strategies for each group. For that negative guest who just prefers talking to people, a hotel should really emphasize its human staff. For the ambivalent guest who's on the fence, they need a human tech concierge right there to help build their confidence. It's basically a roadmap for how businesses can actually cater to everyone. So all of this leads to a really critical point. If we want these robots to actually succeed, we have to start designing them with all these different human attitudes in mind. A huge question in robot design is always, how human should they look? It's easy to just assume that more human is always better, right? But that can seriously backfire and drop us right into the uncanny valley, that creepy feeling you get when something is almost human but not quite. This is so fascinating. The study showed people 5 different robots, each one a little more human-like than the last. And the robot that every single attitude profile, all 4 of them, rated as the most sociable and the least creepy? It wasn't the most human-like one. It was Nimbro, a robot with a medium level of human features. It just hit that sweet spot for everybody. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? It's that one size absolutely does not fit all. If you want to build robot services for everyone, you need to attack it from all sides. You have to keep the positives engaged with new stuff. You need to reassure the negatives by giving them a human choice. You have to prove the real value to the indifferent. And, most importantly, you have to support and build trust with that massive group of ambivalent users. Which leaves us with a final question to chew on. We know these attitude profiles are pretty stable across the population, even as technology changes. So, as we share more and more of our world with robots, are we going to learn to trust them and overcome our anxieties? Or will that need for human touch always be something we fundamentally crave?